Hello, my dear friend. Welcome to tonight's bedtime story. My name is Tony, and it is my deepest joy to be here with you to help guide you into the peaceful embrace of sleep. If this is your first time joining me, you are so very welcome, like a traveler, finding a warm hearth on a cold night. And if you've been here before, it's a pleasure to see you again. Like a friend returning home to familiar, comforting surroundings, your presence makes this moment even more special, and I am grateful for every breath we share. I know that today may have been long, perhaps filled with tasks that stretched on, or thoughts that swirled like leaves in the wind. But now, you're here, in this soft, tranquil space. There's nothing left to do. Nothing left to hold, just my voice and your steady breath, guiding you into a peaceful state of relaxation. Tonight, we will take a journey together to the world of ancient myths and gods, to a time when the sky was wide and the earth was full of mysteries. We'll visit the realm of the Norse gods, a world of gods, giants and heroes, where the sun and moon once lived, and the earth was shaped by great powers. Tonight we'll journey with the gods of Asgard, where stories unfold with every step, and the mysteries of the old world come to life. But before we begin this story, let's take a moment to unwind. Take a deep breath. Inhale gently, filling your lungs with calm. And as you exhale, let the weight of the day melt away. There is no rush, no hurry, only the rhythm of your breath and the calm of this space. Now, if you enjoy these stories and find comfort in them, please remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep the stories flowing, and your feedback, your thoughts and suggestions mean the world to us. They guide us in making these moments even more special. Now let's journey into the heart of the Norse world, where gods and giants clash and great adventures unfold. Are you ready? Let's begin. Advixensi Umfwes, Part 1. The Birth of the Gods. In the beginning, long before the earth had taken shape, before the mountains rose and the rivers flowed, there was only darkness. This darkness was deep and endless, stretching far and wide, a place where neither light nor warmth could reach. It was called Ginnungagap, the great void, the space that would give birth to all things. And then, from this vast emptiness, something wonderful began to emerge. In the north of Ginnungagap, there was a cold and icy realm called Niflheim. The cold was so bitter, so unrelenting, that it froze everything in its path. And from this frozen world came a river of ice and mist, known as the Elivaga. The icy river flowed through the dark void, touching the edges of another realm, a place of fire and heat known as Muspelheim. Muspelheim, on the other hand, was a land of blazing fire where flames reached high into the sky, burning with an intensity that could melt even the hardest stone. It was a land filled with heat and light, the opposite of the cold and darkness that came from Niflheim. The heat from Muspelheim met the cold of Niflheim, and when the two realms collided in the heart of Ginnungagap, a great change took place. Warmth began to melt the ice, and from this melting came the first drop of water. This drop of water became the beginning of all life, and it formed into the first being in the world, a giant named Ymir. Ymir was a creature of great size and strength, born from the meeting of fire and ice. He was the first of the Jotnar, the giants who would come to live in the world, and his body was the very foundation of everything that would come afterward. But Ymir was not alone. As he slept more, beings appeared. The sweat from his body gave birth to other giant creatures of ice and fire, all powerful and all fierce. But from this great being something else began to stir. As the ice melted away and the warmth spread, the great cow Audhumla was born. Audhumla was no ordinary cow. She was magnificent, her coat shining with a brilliant light. She fed on the salty ice that she licked, and as she licked the ice, something magical happened. She uncovered another being, a being of divine beauty, whose name was Buri Buri, was the first of the gods to emerge, and as he stepped out of the ice, his presence brought a spark of light and life to the world. He was strong and wise, and it was from him that the Aesir, the family of gods, would come. Buri had a son named Bor, who would marry the giantess Besla, and together they would give birth to 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve, first of the gods destined to rule over the world. Odin, the eldest of the 3 brothers, was the most powerful. He was wise beyond measure, with eyes that saw the past, the present, and the future. Odin's heart was full of curiosity, and his spirit was driven by the need to understand the mysteries of the world. He sought knowledge in every corner of the 9 realms, always searching, always learning. Vili and Ve. Odin's brothers were powerful in their own right, but it was Odin who was destined to lead. Together, the 3 brothers Odin, Vili, and Ve would shape the world and give it its form. They looked upon the world that was being created, the land still wild and untamed, and they knew it was their responsibility to give it shape, to bring it into balance. Together they slayed Ymir, the first giant, and from his body they created the world. Ymir's flesh became the earth, his blood became the oceans, and his bones became the mountains. His hair turned into the trees, and his skull became the sky held up by 4 great dwarves, who stood at each of the world's 4 corners, holding it steady. From the sparks of Muspelheim, Odin and his brothers created the sun and the moon, and they set them into motion in the sky, giving day and night their rhythm. The stars twinkled above like the eyes of the gods themselves, watching over the world they had created. And so the world began, a world of land and sea, of light and darkness, of gods and giants. The first beings, the gods of Asgard, were born from the union of fire and ice, their power shaping the world, their hearts filled with love and wisdom. As Odin and his brothers looked down upon the world they had made, they knew that it was not yet complete. There was still much to do, and many more beings to create. But in that moment, as the first light of day broke across the horizon, the gods looked upon their creation with pride, knowing that their journey had only just begun. Part 2. The creation of man and the rise of Asgard. The gods of Asgard looked upon the world they had crafted, and though it was beautiful, it was still incomplete. It was full of forests, rivers, and mountains. But there was something missing, a spark of life that would make it whole. And so the gods gathered together, each of them bringing their strength, their wisdom, and their dreams into one unified vision. It was time to create beings who would walk the earth, beings who could think, feel, and grow. From the flesh of Ymir, they had formed the world, and now it was time for them to breathe life into it. Odin, wise beyond measure, was the first to speak. He looked out over the land, his eyes searching for what was needed. And then he turned to his brothers Vili and Ve. "It is time," Odin said in a voice that rumbled like thunder, "to shape the first humans, the beings who will inherit this world." Vili nodded, his strong face illuminated by the light of the newly formed sun. "Let us create them in our image with our strength and wisdom, that they may walk upon the earth and grow as we have." The youngest of the brothers smiled and placed his hand upon the earth. "Let them have hearts filled with love and the power to dream. Let them have the ability to create just as we do." With their plan in place, the brothers, Odin, Vili, and Ve, walked to the shore of a sparkling river that flowed through the land, a river so clear that the sunlight danced upon its surface like glittering stars. The gods gathered together and began their work. First, they found 2 trees, one of ash and one of elm, standing side by side, their branches stretching toward the sky. These trees were ancient, their roots deep within the earth, their trunks strong and steadfast. The gods saw these trees as the perfect foundation for the first humans. Odin raised his hand and touched the tree of ash. He gave it life. With a whisper, he breathed the essence of spirit into the tree. His breath filled the tree, and its bark grew even stronger, and its roots stretched deeper into the earth. This tree, he thought, would be the foundation of man. Next, Vili placed his hand upon the tree of elm. He gave it the gift of movement. The tree's limbs grew more flexible. Its branches swayed with the wind, and its leaves rustled in the breeze. This tree, he thought, would be the foundation of life. Then V stepped forward and placed his hand upon both trees, bringing them together. From the ash he gave soul, from the elm he gave heart. The 2 trees began to merge their trunks, intertwining, and from this merging came the first man and the first woman. Odin, Vili, and Ve smiled as they looked upon the 2 new beings. They were beautiful, tall, with glowing skin that reflected the light of the sun, eyes filled with wonder and curiosity. They could walk, they could speak, and most importantly, they could think. They were the first of the humans, and the gods had gifted them with the ability to create and shape the world as they saw fit. The gods then took a step back and watched as the 2 beings who had been formed from the trees stood up, their hands reaching out to touch the earth. They were alive, and their hearts were filled with the same spirit and love that the gods had given them. These 2. Odin said softly, "will be the first of many. They will walk upon the earth, and they will become the ancestors of all humankind. Their journey will be one of growth, learning, and creating. The world will be shaped by their actions, just as the gods shaped the world." The first humans, who the gods named Ask and Embla, looked around them amazed by the beauty of the world. They walked together as they explored the lands of their new world. As the gods watched them, they saw something else. A spark of creativity, a drive to build, and a longing for knowledge. The humans, like the gods, would change the world. They would be the ones to populate the earth, build kingdoms, and shape the future. They would create stories of their own, stories that would one day be told around campfires passed down through generations. The gods knew that Ask and Embla would be the beginning of something much greater They would bring life to the earth, and from them would come the great heroes, the kings and the warriors, who would fight for honor and glory. As the first humans explored their new world, the gods of Asgard looked on proud of their creation. They knew that the world was no longer empty. It was filled with life, with love, and with the promise of endless stories. And so, the world began to grow. The forests expanded, the rivers flowed, and the mountains rose higher, all shaped by the actions of the first humans. The gods knew their work was not yet done, but for now they could rest, knowing that the first chapter of their creation had been written, and the world was no longer a blank canvas. Arndisaminas. Tartian Part 3. The Rise of Asgard and the First Battle. As the first humans, Ask and Embla, began their journey across the world, their hearts full of wonder and hope, the gods of Asgard saw the world taking shape before their eyes. The earth created from Ymir's body was vast and untamed, full of beauty, but also full of danger. The gods knew that they could not leave this world to the whims of chance, for it was their responsibility to protect it. And so Odin, the eldest and wisest of the gods, stood upon the highest peak of Asgard, his gaze stretching across the realms. Asgard was a shining city built high upon the mountains that rose from the world's surface. It gleamed with the light of the stars, and its great halls were made of gold and silver, crafted by the finest dwarves, and enchanted with the magic of the gods themselves. But even in such a magnificent realm, Odin knew that danger was always lurking. The giants, the Jotnar, still roamed the wild places, their hearts filled with hatred for the gods who had cast them out of the fertile lands. The gods had fought long and hard to establish their realm, and yet the giants would never rest. They were a constant threat, a reminder that the gods' rule could always be challenged. As Odin stood upon the mountain, the wind sweeping through his long flowing beard, he turned to his brothers Vili and Ve and spoke of his thoughts. "Our world is beautiful but fragile," he said, his voice deep and full of wisdom. "The giants are restless, and I fear they may strike again. We must build a city that will stand as a symbol of our strength, and we must protect it at all costs." Vili, ever the warrior, nodded. "We will build Asgard into a fortress, Odin. It will be a place where the gods can rest, but also a place where we can defend our realm from any who would seek to destroy it." Heidi. The kind-hearted of the brothers smiled softly. "And we will fill it with knowledge, Odin. We will teach the humans the ways of the gods, how to build, how to grow, and how to live in harmony with the world." Together the three gods set about their task. Asgard grew day by day, its halls growing higher, its towers more magnificent, its gates stronger. The gods summoned the finest builders, the most skilled craftsmen, and the most powerful enchantments to shape their realm. It was a place of both beauty and strength, where the gods could gather and live in peace, but also where they could prepare for the inevitable conflict that would come. But peace, as always, was fleeting. It was not long before the giants, led by their king, Ymir's descendant Surtur, launched a great attack upon Asgard. The giants, bitter with hatred and jealousy, sought to destroy the gods' creation, to burn Asgard to the ground, and take their place as rulers of the realms. Surtur, a towering figure of flame and fury, stood at the head of his army of giants. His eyes burned with the fires of Muspelheim, and his sword, forged in the heart of a dying star, crackled with heat and power. He led his forces across the Bifrost, the shimmering bridge that connected Asgard to the mortal realm. The sky was filled with the sounds of thunder and the scent of smoke, as Surtur's army marched toward Asgard, determined to end the gods' reign once and for all. The gods knew they had to act quickly. Odin summoned his mighty spear Gungnir, a weapon forged by the dwarves that would never miss its target. His brothers, Vili and Ve, prepared their weapons as well, knowing that a great battle awaited them. The gods stood side by side, their hearts full of courage, their spirits unwavering. The giants charged forward, their great forms casting long shadows over the land. The ground shook with each step they took, and the air was filled with the sound of their battle cries. The gods stood tall, their faces set in determination as they faced their ancient enemies. The battle was fierce. Odin clashed with Surtur himself, their swords sparking as they met in the heart of the battlefield. The fire from Surtur's blade clashed with the cold steel of Odin's Gungnir, and the sky above seemed to darken with the fury of their combat. The ground around them cracked and shattered, and the very heavens trembled as the two mighty beings fought for supremacy. Vili and Ve fought beside their brother, each of them facing a giant of their own. Vili's strikes were swift and strong, his sword cutting through the giant's ranks with precision, while Ve used his wisdom and magic to create shields of light protecting the gods from the giant's fierce blows. But even as the gods fought valiantly, they knew that this battle was not just a fight for their survival. It is a fight for the future of the realms. The giants sought to destroy the harmony that the gods had created, and if they were allowed to succeed, all would be lost in the heart of the battle. Odin saw Surtur's fiery sword rising once more, and he knew that time had come to strike with all his might. With a fierce cry, he threw Gungnir with all his strength, the spear cutting through the air like a bolt of lightning. Surtur's flame met the spear head-on, and for a moment time seemed to stand still. With a final earth-shattering clash, Surtur fell to the ground, his great body crashing into the earth with a mighty roar. The fire that had burned in his eyes faded, and the giants began to retreat, their hearts filled with fear at the fall of their leader. The gods had won the battle, but they knew that peace was fragile. Asgard had been defended, but the giants would return. There would always be challenges, always be battles to fight. But for now, the gods stood victorious, their hearts filled with pride, knowing that their realm was safe for the time being. Part 4. The Gift of Knowledge and the First Prophecy. After the battle had subsided and the giants had retreated back to the cold, shadowy corners of the world, the gods of Asgard stood tall, their spirits filled with pride. They had won the battle, but Odin knew in his heart that the fight for peace was never truly over. Asgard, the city of the gods, stood as a beacon of strength and wisdom in the center of the realms. But it also symbolized the fragile balance between order and chaos, light and dark. Odin, ever wise and thoughtful, looked upon the world below. The humans, who had been created from the trees of ash and elm, were flourishing in their new world. Their hearts were full of wonder, their minds filled with the potential for greatness, and yet Odin could see that they lacked something that would allow them to grow to understand the world around them and to shape their own destinies. He gathered his brothers Vili and Ve in the great hall of Asgard, the golden walls gleaming with the light of the sun. The sky outside was painted with the colors of dusk, the stars beginning to shimmer in the distance. Odin stood before them, his eyes filled with purpose. We have gifted the humans with life, with hearts filled with love. Odin began, his voice deep and steady. But they are still children of the earth. They need knowledge, wisdom, something that will help them grow and shape their world. It is time to bestow upon them the gifts of the gods. Vili and Ve nodded in agreement, understanding the importance of this moment. They had seen the potential in the humans, and now they knew that it was time to nurture it. Odin raised his hand, and from the depths of Asgard, he summoned a great tree, a tree unlike any other, its roots reaching deep into the earth, its branches stretching toward the heavens. The tree was Yggdrasil, the world tree, the sacred tree that connected all the realms of existence from the deepest roots of the earth to the highest heavens. Odin placed his hand upon the tree, and as he did, a golden light flowed from his fingertips, filling the tree, with the essence of the god. The tree pulsed with power, its leaves shimmering with knowledge, its branches bearing the fruits of wisdom. This, Odin declared, would be the tree that would provide knowledge to the humans. Its fruits would grant them the understanding of the world, the ability to speak with the gods, and the knowledge of the past, present, and future. Vili and Voi stood beside Odin, and together the gods called upon the humans to approach. From the world below, Ask and Embla, the first humans, stepped forward, their hearts full of curiosity and wonder. They gazed up at the towering tree, its branches heavy with glowing fruits, each one radiating with the light of the stars. Odin spoke softly, his voice, a gentle murmur that carried across the winds. The fruits of Yggdrasil are for you, for all the children of the earth. With them you will gain the wisdom of the gods, the knowledge of the world, and the understanding of your place within it. Ask, and Embla reached up their hands, trembling as they touched the fruit. The moment they did, their minds were filled with visions of the world's creation, of the gods, of the giants, and of the great battles that had shaped the realms. They saw the cycles of life, the rhythm of the seasons, and the interconnectedness of all things. With this knowledge, they understood their role in the world. They were not mere creatures of the earth. They were part of something greater, something eternal. But as the vision faded, another presence emerged, one that was both gentle and heavy, like a distant storm on the horizon. It was the voice of fate itself, echoing through the halls of Asgard. The gods turned their gaze toward the sky, where the stars twinkled like the eyes of ancient beings, watching over the world. Know this, children of the earth. The voice spoke, its tone both calming and ominous, that the gift of knowledge carries with it a great responsibility. The path you walk will be filled with light and darkness, with triumph and sorrow. You will face challenges that will test your strength, your wisdom, and your hearts. Odin stepped forward, his eyes filled with the wisdom of ages. What do you see? fate. He asked, his voice carrying the weight of countless lifetimes. Fate's voice, soft but powerful, spoke again. The humans will rise and they will build great civilizations. They will create wonders and their hearts will be full of both love and war. But in their future, there is a great reckoning, a battle that will determine the fate of all realms. The gods, the giants, and the humans will stand at the crossroads of destiny, and only through unity, courage, and wisdom will they prevail. The air grew still, and the gods felt the weight of the prophecy settle upon their hearts. Odin, Vili, and Ve exchanged solemn glances, knowing that the time would come when the world they had created would face its greatest challenge. But for now, they stood together knowing that the seeds of wisdom had been planted, and that the journey of the gods and humans was far from over. As Ask and Embla returned to their lives, the fruits of Yggdrasil in their hands, the gods stood in silence watching over the realms. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a soft golden light upon the world. In that moment, the gods knew that they had given the world the gift of knowledge, but they also knew that the future was uncertain. Act Part 5, The First Hero and the Trials of Man. The seasons passed and the world that the gods had so carefully shaped began to grow in unexpected ways. The land flourished with forests and fields. The rivers teemed with life and the seas stretched far beyond the horizon. Humans, the children of Ask and Embla, spread across the earth, each one walking their own path, guided by the wisdom of the gods and the gifts of the world tree. They learned the art of building and farming, of hunting and fishing, and slowly they began to shape the world in their own image. The gods watched with pride as the humans grew in strength and knowledge, but they knew that greatness could not come without trials. For in every heart there lies a spark of potential, a potential to create, to destroy, to lead, and to fall. The gods had given humans the gifts of life and wisdom, but it was up to them to prove their worth. It was in the heart of the deepest forest, where the trees grew tall and wild, that the first true hero would rise. His name was Vidar, a man born from humble beginnings, the son of a blacksmith who had worked tirelessly to forge tools for the villagers. Vidar had always felt a calling in his heart, a longing for something more than the peaceful life of a craftsman. His heart burned with the desire for adventure, for something greater than the world he knew. One fateful night, as the stars shone brightly overhead and the moon cast a silver light upon the land, Vidar stood before his father's forge, the sound of the hammer striking the anvil filling the stillness of the night. He had forged countless weapons, but none had felt as right as the sword he now held in his hand. It was a sword unlike any other, its blade shimmering with an otherworldly light, and its hilt engraved with runes of old. The sword Vidar knew was destined for something great. "Father," Vidar said softly, his voice filled with a mixture of determination and uncertainty, "I cannot stay here any longer. The world calls to me and I must answer." His father, an older man with weathered hands and a wise heart, looked at him with both pride and sorrow in his eyes. "You have always been meant for something greater, my son," he said, his voice deep and calm. "But know this, true heroes are not made through strength alone. they are made through the trials they endure, the choices they make in times of darkness. Go, and may the gods watch over you." With a final glance at his father, Vidar set forth into the wilds, the sword at his side glowing faintly in the night. The world was vast and full of wonders, but it was also full of dangers. Creatures of darkness, giants and beasts that roamed the land. Yet Vidar felt no fear. His heart was steadfast, and his resolve was unwavering. He knew that his journey had begun. As he ventured deeper into the forest, the path before him became more treacherous. The trees grew thicker, their branches twisting like the hands of ancient giants. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth, and the sound of creatures moving through the underbrush echoed in the distance. Vidar's steps were quiet, his senses alert to every sound and movement around him. It was then that he encountered his first trial, a creature of shadow and fire, its eyes glowing like embers, its body twisting with the darkness of the forest. It was a Fenrir wolf, a beast born from the depths of chaos, and its hunger was unyielding. The wolf snarled as it approached, its teeth bared its claws, digging into the earth as it moved closer to Vidar. But Vidar did not falter. He had been trained for this moment, and he drew the sword from its sheath, its blade gleaming in the moonlight. The wolf lunged, its jaws snapping, but Vidar was quick. With a swift motion, he swung the sword, the steel cutting through the air like a flash of lightning. The wolf howled in pain, but it did not retreat. For what seemed like an eternity, Vidar and the Fenrir wolf battled, their movements fluid and fierce. The forest seemed to hold its breath as the two forces of light and darkness clashed. But Vidar, his heart full of courage and his mind sharp with focus, struck the final blow. With a mighty swing, he cleaved the wolf's head from its body, the creature's lifeless form falling to the ground. Vidar stood over the fallen beast, his chest heaving with exhaustion. But his heart was full. He had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. The sword in his hand hummed with energy, and the runes upon its blade glowed with a soft, ethereal light. It was as though the sword itself had recognized the strength within him. As he continued his journey, Vidar's name began to spread across the land. The people spoke of the young hero who had slain the Fenrir wolf, and the gods themselves looked upon him with interest. He was not just a man. He was becoming something more, a force of nature, a symbol of hope and strength for those who sought to stand against the darkness. But the path ahead was not yet clear. Vidar would face many more trials, giants, dragons, and the creatures of the deep. His heart would be tested, his courage stretched to its limits, and yet, through each trial he would grow stronger, and the gods would watch, knowing that the fate of the realms would soon rest in the hands of heroes such as him. As Vidar pressed on, he could feel the weight of his destiny drawing closer. He was no longer just a man seeking adventure. He was becoming the hero of legend, his name destined to echo through the halls of Valhalla, where the gods would watch over him for all eternity. And so the first of the great heroes was born, rising from the humble beginnings of a blacksmith's son, to become the champion of the gods, the protector of the realms. The journey had only just begun, and the trials of Vidar would continue to unfold, shaping the fate of the gods, the giants, and the humans alike. Articulentaum omnistamden descendi. Part 6. The Hero's Path and the Coming Darkness. Vidar's journey took him far from the peaceful village, where he had been born, into the deep and untamed parts of the world. As the days passed, he ventured through forests that seemed to whisper with ancient secrets across rivers that shimmered under the light of the moon, and over mountains where the snow never melted. The sword he had forged in the fire of his own heart remained at his side, its blade glowing faintly in the quiet night, an eternal reminder of the path he had chosen. The world was vast, and each step seemed to bring him closer to something greater, something he could not yet understand. He could feel the presence of the gods, watching over him, guiding him. But he knew that his trials were far from over. Though the first battle with the Fenrir wolf had been victorious, he understood now that this was just the beginning of a much greater journey. The fate of the realms rested not only on his strength, but on his wisdom, his choices, and the courage within him. The winds of change began to stir. The world around Vidar seemed to grow darker, the air thicker with the weight of what was to come. As he traveled deeper into the northern lands, he sensed that something ancient was waking something old and powerful that had been lying dormant for centuries. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Vidar arrived at a great lake. The water was as still as glass, reflecting the colors of the twilight sky. The air was cool and filled with the scent of pine, and the only sound was the gentle rustling of leaves in the evening breeze. He knelt by the water, gazing into its depths, when a figure emerged from the shadows, stepping gracefully from the water's edge. It was Freya, the goddess of love and beauty, her golden hair flowing behind her like a cascade of sunlight. She walked toward Vidar with a serene grace, her eyes filled with ancient wisdom. Though her appearance was soft and gentle, there was something about her that radiated power, something that transcended time and space. Vesha Vidar, she said, her voice like the sound of distant waves against the shore. You have come far, but your journey is not yet complete. You have proven yourself strong, but you will need more than strength to face what lies ahead. Vidar stood bowing his head in respect, his heart filled with awe at the sight of the goddess before him. I seek knowledge, he replied, his voice steady, but filled with a quiet longing. I must know what is coming. The world is changing, and I feel the darkness drawing closer. What must I do? Freya's gaze softened as she looked out over the lake, her eyes seeming to peer beyond the horizon. The darkness you feel is the stirrings of Ragnarok, the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. It is a time when the gods, the giants, and the humans will clash, and the very fabric of the realms will be tested. But do not fear, for even in the darkest times, there is always hope. Vidar listened intently, his heart heavy with the weight of the goddess's words. He had heard the tales of Ragnarok, the great battle that could bring an end to the old world and usher in a new one. But he had always believed it was a distant legend, something that would come far in the future, if at all it is coming. Freya continued, her voice low and filled with sorrow. The giants led by Surtur are preparing for war, and the gods must gather their strength. you Vidar will play a crucial role in the coming battle. But first, you must seek out the Well of Urd, where the past, present, and future converge. There you will receive the wisdom you need to face what is to come. Vidar nodded, his heart steady, though the weight of the prophecy hung heavily upon him. I will go, he said, to the Well of Urd. But how will I know what to do once I reach it? Freya smiled softly, her eyes twinkling with an inner light. The answer lies within you. The Well of Urd will show you the way. Trust in yourself. Vidar, trust in your heart, and you will know what must be done. With that, the goddess of love and beauty turned and walked back toward the water, disappearing into the mist as gracefully as she had arrived. Vidar stood there for a long moment, his mind filled with the weight of her words. He knew that his journey was far from over, and that the trials ahead would test him in ways he could not yet understand. But he also knew that the gods were with him, guiding him, giving him the strength to face whatever was to come. As the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, Vidar set his gaze toward the north, where the Well of Urd awaited. The path would be long, and the challenges would grow harder. But Vidar was no longer the young man who had set out from his village. He was a hero shaped by battle and wisdom, ready to face the darkness that threatened the world. And so he journeyed on, his heart filled with both courage and doubt, knowing that his destiny was in his hands and the fate of the realms would be shaped by his choices. Part 7. The Well of Urd and the Path of Destiny. Vidar's journey took him farther from the familiar lands he once knew, through dark forests, where the trees whispered of ancient secrets, over mountains shrouded in mist, and across rivers that sang with the voices of the past. Each step he took brought him closer to the Well of Urd, the sacred place where past, present, and future converged in an endless dance. It was said that the well held the wisdom of the Norse, the three sisters who wove the threads of fate itself, and those who sought its waters would be granted the insight needed to understand their place in the grand design of the universe. As the days passed, Vidar's heart grew heavy with the knowledge that the battle of Ragnarok was drawing near. The sky above him seemed to darken with the weight of the future, and the air around him felt charged, as if the very elements were holding their breath in anticipation of what was to come. The world was vast and filled with beauty, yet there was an undercurrent of tension, an awareness that the balance between light and dark, life and death, was fragile. One evening, as the moon rose high in the sky, casting a pale glow over the land, Vidar reached the edge of a great forest. The trees stood tall and silent, their ancient branches reaching toward the heavens. In the distance, he could hear the faint murmur of water, as if the forest itself was breathing alive with the rhythms of the earth. He knew that the Well of Urd was near. As he ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew cooler and the shadows seemed to stretch longer. The trees closed in around him, their roots twisting like serpents beneath the earth. It was as if the forest was guiding him, leading him toward his destiny. And then at the heart of the forest, Vidar saw it, the Well of Urd, nestled in a grove of ancient oak trees, its waters shimmering with an ethereal light. The well was unlike anything Vidar had ever seen. It was not a simple pool of water, but a vast, radiant lake, its surface reflecting the stars above and the roots of the great trees that surrounded it. The water itself seemed to pulse with a life of its own, rippling gently as if it were breathing. The air around the well was thick with magic, and the scent of earth and moss filled Vidar's lungs. At the edge of the well stood 3 figures, the Norns, the weavers of fate. They were silent, their faces hidden in the shadows, their forms draped in robes, woven from the very threads of time itself. Vidar approached cautiously, his heart pounding with anticipation. He knew that these were the beings who shaped the world, the ones who wove the destinies of gods and men alike. The Norns did not speak, but Vidar felt their gaze upon him. He knelt at the edge of the well, his sword resting by his side, and looked into the waters. The surface shimmered, and in its depths, he saw images of the world, images of the gods, the giants, and the humans. He saw the great battles of the past, the struggles between light and dark, and the endless cycles of life and death that shaped the realms. And then the water changed. The images grew darker, and Vidar saw the rise of Surta, the fire giant, and his army of darkness. The flames of Muspelheim surged across the land, burning everything in their path. The gods stood strong, but Vidar saw that their strength alone would not be enough. The final battle of Ragnarok was drawing near, and the fate of all the realms hung in the balance. The vision shifted, and Vidar saw himself standing at the heart of the battle, his sword raised high. He fought beside the gods, his heart filled with courage, but he knew that his path was fraught with peril. The darkness of the giants would not be easy to overcome. And yet, in the midst of the chaos, Vidar saw something else, a light faint but steady shining from within him. The Norns, who had been watching silently, spoke at last. Their voices were soft like the wind whispering through the trees. Vidar, they said, their voices echoing in his mind. You are the key. The world will be torn apart by the forces of darkness, but through you, a new path will be forged. You will stand at the crossroads of fate, and your choices will shape the future. Vidar's heart swelled with both fear and determination. He understood now. The battle of Ragnarok was inevitable, but it was not the end. It was a turning point, a moment when the realms would be reborn through the choices of those who stood in the light. The Norns continued. You have been chosen not because of your strength alone, but because of your heart. The world is in your hands. Vidar, the fire and the ice, the light and the dark, all must come together in harmony. Only then will the cycle of the realms be completed, and a new age begin. Vidar rose to his feet, his heart filled with both awe and resolve. He looked into the waters of the Well of Urd one last time, knowing that the journey ahead would be one of unimaginable trials and challenges. But he was no longer afraid. He was ready to face the darkness, to stand beside the gods, and to fight for the future of all the realms. As he turned to leave the well, the Norns' voices echoed in his mind once more, their words a soft reminder of the prophecy. The threads of fate are woven with every choice. Make yours wisely, and the future will be yours to shape. With those words, Vidar stepped away from the Well of Urd and into the unknown, his heart filled with the knowledge that the destiny of the realms rested in his hands. Part 8. Gathering Storm and the Battle of the Realms. The days that followed Vidar's visit to the Well of Urd were filled with a growing sense of anticipation. The air around him seemed to hum with energy, as if the very fabric of the world was waiting for something monumental to happen. The prophecy had been clear. The darkness of Ragnarok would soon descend, and all the realms would be tested. Vidar had been chosen to play a key role in this battle, and he felt the weight of destiny on his shoulders. As he traveled through the lands, the once peaceful world began to show signs of the coming storm. The winds turned colder, the skies darker, and even the rivers seemed to move with a sense of urgency, as though the earth itself was bracing for the inevitable clash between the gods and the giants. The sun, once bright and warm, now seemed distant, its light pale and weak, as if it too was uncertain of the future. Vidar's heart was full of resolve, but doubt lingered in the back of his mind. He had seen the future in the waters of the Well of Urd, and he knew that the path ahead would not be easy. The giants led by Surtur were marching toward Asgard, their flames burning hotter with each passing day. The gods were preparing for battle, but there was a feeling of uncertainty that hung in the air. Would they be able to defeat the giants? Would the realms survive the coming storm? One evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains and the stars began to twinkle in the vast sky, Vidar stood at the edge of a great cliff overlooking the vast expanse of the world below. The wind rustled through his hair, and he felt a deep connection to the earth beneath his feet, as if the very soul of the world was whispering to him. It was a moment of stillness, a fleeting peace before the storm. From the distance he saw the first signs of the enemy. The giants, like great shadows, were gathering on the horizon, their forms dark and menacing against the dimming light. Surtur, their fiery king, stood at the forefront, his eyes burning with rage and ambition. The flames from Muspelheim surged behind him, a tidal wave of fire that threatened to engulf everything in its path. Vidar knew that the time had come. The world was on the brink of destruction, and the gods, the giants, and the humans would all have to play their part in the coming battle. But Vidar also knew something else, that this was not just a battle for survival. It was a battle for the future of the realms, for the chance to rebuild and reshape the world once the dust had settled. As the giants marched forward, Vidar made his way to Asgard, where the gods were gathering in preparation for the battle. Odin, Vilive, and the other gods stood together in the great hall, their faces grim with determination. The walls of Asgard shimmered with a golden light, but the sense of impending doom could not be ignored. Odin turned to Vidar as he entered the hall. His one-eyed gaze was filled with both pride and sorrow. "You have come, Vidar," he said, his voice steady, but heavy with the weight of knowledge. "The time has come. We face our greatest challenge, and the fate of the realms lies in our hands. The giants seek to bring about the end of the world, but we will not go quietly into the darkness." Vidar nodded, his sword resting at his side. The weapon that had served him so well in battle now felt heavier than ever. He knew that his role in the coming fight was more than just a warrior's. He was the protector of the realms, the last hope against the forces of darkness. "We will fight," Vidar said, his voice filled with the same resolve. that has carried him through every trial. But we must be wise. We must strike at the heart of the enemy, for the longer the battle lasts, the more we risk losing everything. Odin's eyes softened as he looked upon the young hero. Your heart is true, Vidar, and your wisdom will guide us. But even wisdom cannot prevent what is to come. The darkness of Surtur's fire will test us all. We must fight with all that we have, for if we do not, the realms will fall. As the gods prepared for battle, the skies above Asgard grew darker, and the air crackled with the electricity of the coming storm. The Bifrost, the shimmering bridge that connected Asgard to the other realms, pulsed with light as the gods called upon their allies, dwarves, elves, and the creatures of the earth, all who were willing to stand against the giants. The time for words was over. The battle was upon them, and all the gods with Vidar leading the charge gathered at the gates of Asgard, ready to face Surtur and his army of giants. Vidar's heart beat steady in his chest as he looked out at the vast expanse before him. He knew that the battle ahead would be long and filled with suffering, but he also knew that it was a fight worth waging, for in the end, the fate of the realms and of all the worlds would depend on the choices they made in this moment. With a final breath, Vidar drew his sword and raised it high, his voice ringing out across the battlefield. Let the battle begin. Part 9. The Battle of the Realms. The earth trembled beneath their feet as the armies of gods and giants clashed in the heart of the battlefield. The skies were filled with the sound of roaring winds, and the air was thick with the scent of smoke and the crackle of flames. The battlefield, once quiet and serene, was now a place of chaos and destruction. The very foundations of the world seemed to shake as the forces of light and darkness collided. Vidar stood at the forefront of the gods, his sword held high, his heart filled with the resolve that had carried him through every trial. His eyes burned with the fire of determination, but there was a stillness within him, a quiet knowing that this was the moment that would shape the future of the realms. His role in this battle was not just as a warrior, but as the protector of the earth, the one who would stand against the tide of darkness and ensure that the light would not be extinguished. Around him, the gods fought with all their might. Odin, Vili, and Ve, along with the other gods of Asgard, stood tall and fierce, their weapons flashing as they struck down the giants one by one. Thunder rumbled in the sky as Thor swung his hammer, Mjolnir sending bolts of lightning crashing into the ranks of their enemies. The forces of Muspelheim, led by Surtur, were relentless, but the gods were equally determined to defend their realm. Vidar's eyes never left the battlefield. He fought with the precision and grace of a true hero, his sword cutting through the chaos, a beacon of light in the darkness. But it was not just strength that guided him, it was wisdom, the knowledge he had gained from his journey, the understanding that every decision, every action had consequences. In this moment, he understood that the battle was not just about defeating the enemy. It was about protecting the world, protecting the future of all the realms. The ground shook violently as Surtur, the fiery king of the giants, entered the battlefield, his massive form looming like a shadow over the land, his sword blazing with the fire of Muspelheim. Cut through the air leaving trails of flame in its wake. His eyes burned with the fury of 1,000 suns, and his laughter echoed across the battlefield like the roar of a storm. Vidar felt a surge of determination within him. This was the moment he had been preparing for, the moment he would face Surtur and end the threat that had loomed over the realms since the beginning of time. He could feel the weight of the prophecy, the knowledge that he was the key to the future of the realms. He was not just fighting for his own survival, but for the survival of everything he had come to love. With a battle cry, Vidar charged toward Surtur's sword, gleaming in the fiery light. The heat from Surtur's flames seemed to sear the air itself, but Vidar pressed forward, undeterred. His heart was calm, his mind focused, and as he reached the fire giant, he struck with all his might. The clash of their weapons was deafening. Vidar's sword met Surtur's blazing blade, sending a shockwave through the battlefield. The flames from Surtur's sword clashed with the cold steel of Vidar's blade, sparks flying in every direction. The very air seemed to catch fire as the two mighty forces collided. Vidar's body shook with the force of the battle, but he did not falter. He knew that the fate of the realms rested on this moment, and he would not let darkness claim victory. With a mighty roar, Vidar summoned all the strength within him and delivered a final devastating blow. His sword cut through Surtur's flame-wreathed blade, and with one swift strike he pierced the heart of the fire. Giant Surtur let out a great fiery cry as his body crumpled to the ground, the flames around him flickering and dying. The earth trembled beneath the impact, and the skies seemed to darken as Surtur's fiery form fell silent. For a moment, the battlefield stood still. The clash of weapons, the cries of battle, the roar of the storm. They all paused as the realization spread that the fire giant, the embodiment of destruction, had fallen. But the battle was far from over. The gods and the giants continued to fight their struggle, echoing across the realms. The forces of Muspelheim may have been weakened, but the cost of the battle was high, and the fate of all the realms was still uncertain. Vidar stood over the fallen giant, his breath coming in heavy gasps, his sword still glowing with the fire of the battle. His heart beat steadily in his chest, and he felt the weight of the moment settle upon him. The darkness that had threatened to consume the realms had been repelled, but it was only a temporary victory. The Battle of Ragnarok was not the end, but the beginning of a new world, one that would be shaped by the choices of the gods, the giants, and the humans. As the smoke began to clear and the first rays of dawn broke through the darkness, Vidar looked around him. The gods stood victorious. The cost of the battle was evident. The fields were littered with the fallen, and the air was thick with the scent of smoke and blood. The realms had been tested, but they had not yet been destroyed. Vidar knew that the future was still uncertain. The darkness had not been vanquished, but the light had not been extinguished either. The world would rebuild, but the path ahead would be long and filled with challenges. And yet, in his heart, Vidar felt a deep sense of peace. The battle was over for now. The world had been saved, and the realms would continue shaped by the courage and wisdom of those who fought to protect them. With a final glance at the battlefield, Vidar turned toward Asgard, knowing that his journey was far from over. The gods had won the battle, but the true work of rebuilding the world would take time, patience, and the wisdom of both gods and men. Part 10. The Dawn of a New World. As the final embers of battle began to fade, and the smoke of the war lifted from the realms, a profound silence settled over the land. The earth scarred and broken from the great clash between the gods and the giants now lay still. The wind whispered softly through the trees. The rivers ran quietly over their banks, and the stars, though dimmed by the darkness, still twinkled brightly in the heavens above. Vidar stood alone on the battlefield, his heart heavy with the weight of the battle's toll. The gods had fought valiantly. The giants had been repelled, and the forces of Muspelheim had been defeated. But the world had changed. The landscape was different now, shattered and broken. But in that destruction, Vidar could see the seeds of a new world beginning to take root. The fire that had threatened to burn everything had been extinguished, but the light of the gods and of the future still flickered in the hearts of the survivors. As Vidar stood at the center of the battlefield, he could hear the soft sounds of footsteps behind him. Turning, he saw the gods Odin, Vili, Thor, and the others slowly making their way toward him. Their faces weary but filled with relief, the light of dawn, soft and gentle, began to shine over Asgard, casting its golden glow over the ruins of the battlefield. Odin, his one eye reflecting the weight of countless ages, approached Vidar and placed a hand upon his shoulder. "You have done what no one could have done, Vidar," he said, his voice rich with both pride and sorrow. "The darkness that threatened to consume the realms has been driven back, but the world has been forever changed." Vidar nodded, his heart full of both pride and weariness. He had done his part. He had fought not just for survival, but for the chance to rebuild. And in that moment he understood that this was not the end. The gods had won the battle, but the work of restoring the realms was just beginning. "The realms are scarred, yes," Vidar replied, his voice steady, "but they are not destroyed. There is still hope. The future lies in the choices we make from here on out. Together we can rebuild what has been lost." The gods stood in silence, each of them reflecting on the words spoken by the young hero. It was true. The battle of Ragnarok had left the realms in ruin, but it had also opened the door to a new beginning. The humans, though they had witnessed the horrors of war, were now free to rebuild and shape their own destinies. The gods, too, would need to adapt to learn from the lessons of the past and forge a future that was better, stronger, and wiser. Thor, his hammer resting by his side, stepped forward, his face softened by the passing of the storm. "The world has been reborn," he said, his voice filled with both sadness and hope. "But it will not be easy. There is much work to be done. We must guide the humans, protect them, and help them grow. But they are strong, and they will rebuild." Vidar looked toward the horizon, where the first light of the new day was beginning to shine. The sun, though weak from the long battle, began to rise higher in the sky, casting its warmth over the land. The earth, broken as it was, seemed to sigh in relief, as if the burden of the old world had finally been lifted. "The work is not ours alone," Vidar said, turning back to the gods. "It is the work of all the realms, the humans, the gods, and even the giants. The balance we fought for must be maintained. and we must teach the humans the ways of the world so that they can protect it, just as we have. Odin's gaze softened as he looked at Vidar, the weight of the world reflected in his eyes. You speak wisely, Vidar. The future belongs to all who dwell in the realms. It is up to us, as the stewards of this world, to guide it into a new age. And so, with the dawn of a new world before them, the gods and humans stood together, united in their resolve to rebuild. The days of war were over, but the work of healing and creation had only just begun. The first steps toward a brighter future were taken that day, as the realms began to heal from the wounds of Ragnarok. Vidar, though weary from the battle, stood tall among the gods, knowing that his journey was far from over. The trials he had faced had shaped him into the hero he had become, and the wisdom he had gained would guide him in the days to come. He was not just a warrior, but a protector of the realms, a keeper of the balance that would shape the future. As the sun rose higher in the sky, Vidar turned toward the horizon, his heart filled with hope for the new world that was unfolding before him. He knew that the path ahead would be long, and that the scars of the past would not easily fade. But he also knew that the light of the gods would always shine, and that as long as they stood together, the realms would never fall into darkness again. And so, with the first light of the new day breaking across the land, Vidar stepped forward, his heart full of purpose and his sword by his side, ready to face the future, whatever it might bring.